Hi there, it's me with Engadget. We're here at Mobile Congress 2013 in Barcelona, and I have with me Scott Croyle, VP of Design for HTC. So, the HTC One, you're the man behind it. It's really exciting.
I wouldn't say I'm the man behind it.
Well, there's many people, but I think you're the vision of the design, especially the hardware. I want to talk to you because, although you launched this before Mobile Congress, which I think was a very smart move, it's obviously you have a big presence here. It's important to be here, and this is by far the most significantly important product you've ever made, right?
Sure.
Right? And I think everybody feels that. And if you pick it up, you feel that. So tell us, how did you go about designing something even better than the One X?
I think every time we approach a design problem, we obviously want to achieve kind of the best thing for people, but ultimately we're designing for ourselves.
Right.
And so we started thinking about what could we do better? And I think one of the things that we looked around at in the industry is that we kind of invented the metal unibody a few years back, and we really wanted to take that to the next level. And one of the things that we thought about was that the bummer about kind of all these metal phones that inevitably you're going to cut away some metal to deal with radios and antennas.
Right.
And so that became like an obvious focal point for us to kind of really go deep on and see if we could kind of break down that last barrier. And so really I think that's the big, on the HTC One, that's one of the big breakthroughs, is they have an all-metal phone that really kind of brings a lot of value to people. And I think when you pick it up with the tapered surfaces where we have the kind of pyramid structure inside, it really becomes a really remarkable thing to hold.
Do you want to just show the back a little bit so people can understand the bands of plastic? I want to know, because this is a zero gap thing where you're molding the plastic into the aluminum and then machining the whole thing, right?
That's right.
Basically.
That's right.
So who came to you with this idea in terms of engineering and said, I think we can make a phone with this and it's a viable thing?
Well, it wasn't so that somebody came to us and said, hey, I think we could do this. We were like, what we want to do.
You tried,
is
okay.
we want the parts, typical when you have any sort of consumer electronic, the parts are manufactured separately and then they're all glued together. We're like, the bummer about that is you feel it, you feel these little gaps here and there. So like, that's another barrier we want to break down. And I think just having the engineering with the unibody and building that expertise over the few years, when we went to the engineering team, they're like, okay, we're not really sure how to do that, but
okay.
let's go give it a shot and let's go try. And so developing that process so that you get that perfect fit and finish. In fact, I was just telling somebody the other day, the number of meetings as a designer I've been in where you look at an image board. We start off with image boards before we actually start sketching. And
right,
showing,
right.
And there's always a high-end watch on there. Oh, we're going to make this premium watch, And then you get to the final product and you're like, I didn't quite realize the dream. This finally feels that way. You finally get to something that actually feels really solid, and you run your finger over it, and it just feels kind of that perfect fit.
It's amazing. I mean, it's hard to see in pictures, guys. The reason I thought maybe somebody came to you is I thought maybe you had a process engineer that was like, we have read about this new thing that, in some machining magazine or some guy's been trying and refined, and we want, maybe something like that came along. No, it's all you.
Well, it's asking the right questions, and I think one of the things that we really try to do at HTC is have the designers be incredibly knowledgeable about the process.
Right.
Because when we're knowledgeable about the process, then we can ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. If you just say, hey, can we do this? Nope, can't do this. And you're like, well, but what if you do it this way?
Right.
Oh, I don't know. And that might not be the solution, but it might lead to somebody else coming up with another solution.
For sure.
So we really encourage the designers to not just ask naive questions, but be informed by asking the right questions.
Awesome. So, when I look at this phone, it's kind of voodoo magic to me as to how you can have NFC, Wi-Fi, multiple radios, including LTE, Bluetooth, all, and probably FM, whatever, all working off of these tiny strips of plastic.
So you look at this, so it's magic to me too, because if you've ever worked with an RF engineer.
Yeah, exactly. They're like,
Well, one thing is funny, is like, oh, can we do this? And they're like, yeah, they come back with some funny graph, like, no, and like, well, what could we do to improve it? We don't know. It's like a black box.
It's magic. Right?
It is magic.
RF is magic.
But I think one of the things that that our RF engineers came up with is these panels. There's actually multiple antennas on some of these panels.
Okay.
Which is pretty crazy if you imagine, say, like GPS and Wi-Fi trying to work together on a single piece of metal.
Right.
It's a pretty amazing innovation that we've been able to achieve.
They're machined as an integral part of the unibody, basically. That's the antennas.
That's right.
All right.
So the way the process works is that we take the metal parts, we put them in a tool, and they're actually a big block. And I think I showed you back in San Francisco what that looked like. Take a metal block, you put some plastic in, and then you start machining them all together. And then those machined parts become the active antenna elements. Now there's a lot of software and there's a lot of other engineering behind that, but that's essentially how the process works.
So let's talk about the next obvious thing. There's the back, which I think is stunning because of that zero gap, but the front, obviously, the display. I mean, how did you manage to top the One X's display, which to me last year was nothing could touch? Like that floating of the icons on the surface, the color rendition, the blacks, it was very accurate in terms of color rendition as well. And of course the resolution I can kind of easily see how you can step forward to 1080p, but I have a hard time understanding how it even looks better.
You know, me too.
You too.
I find, so this is obviously something that we're very involved in and we are passionate about because we're visual people. But I think the engineering team, and I think it's just bringing that focus to dialing in. It just comes down to resources and who's driving, what they're interested in and what they want to be. And so we, I think like you, recognize that at the end of the day, you're looking at photos and videos and playing games and looking at the web, do whatever, and you can really bring that to life with a great display, but then really fine-tuning it and kind of optimizing that. Right. I mean, it seems to me common sense.
So you're using presumably the same supplier that just an iteration better of their display technology, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
You're not going to something else for this?
Well, we're not doing our own custom display. We're not a component manufacturer.
Right.
Although we do develop some of our own custom components, but yeah, we typically work with a supplier and then we'll fine tune it and specialize it for our needs.
So let's talk about the third, I think, kind of tenet of this phone. There's the front, there's the back, and then there's the camera, right? I mean, in terms of hardware, I mean, there's also the speakers, but I mean, we can go on for a while, but tell me about this camera. Like, I have been, for me, instantly, when you said, we have larger pixels, but it's only 4, and we're calling this UltraPixels, I'm like, I get it. But it's been a kind of an uphill battle to talk to a lot of people about this. How do you come to the decision? And the second question is, how are you going to try to push this to educate people?
Sure. Well, I think from HTC's perspective, we like to think of the consumer.
Right.
Obviously, the business is incredibly important, and so we're worried about that. We worry about that. But at the end of the day, pixel count versus pixel size, it seemed like an easy decision. The reality is that pixel count tends to drive the image quality down. Like, given two equivalent pixel counts, pixel size easily way trumps. So for us, we kind of started with what do people want to get out of their photos? So we started with that basic tenet, and then that drove us to the UltraPixel sensor, the UltraPixel camera.
I was actually wondering how much of that was driven purely by the pixel size and trying to get better low light performance. Obviously, you have optical image stabilization to help with that as well. And how much was driven by the software side? Like, we want to do Zoe, that's a lot of data we're gathering, up to 7 frames per second at 4 megapixels, plus 1080p video, all at the same time, potentially in HDR. Was that kind of part of the dictating, like, maybe we should just stick to 4, or was it like, we don't care?
No. So the typical camera sensor development, it's actually much longer than the software development effort. So we actually started the discussion on the camera technology
way
18
back.
months ago.
Wow.
So that was a decision that we made very early on. And then in terms of when we came up with the idea of Zoe, which combines a photo with a video, so actually when you go into the gallery, it's a living gallery as opposed to a static gallery. That really came from thinking about how, what we do with photos and why we take photos. We started, maybe it sounds a bit corny, but we really like to step back and think about maybe a little philosophically about why we're actually taking photos. Well, you take photos because you're going to forget, number one, or you actually want to share it with somebody. You want to show somebody something. Yeah. Pretty straightforward. But if you look at, actually, the technology's changed so radically, but nobody's redefined what a photograph could mean.
Right.
And so it's like, we can do more with this. I think with that basic kind of recognition that we can actually have that Harry Potter moment, when you're actually looking at the picture on the wall and all of a sudden you see him moving. Yeah. Like, once you realize that, you're like, okay, the technology's ready for this.
It's uncanny when you look at the photo gallery. Do you want to show us maybe real quickly? And it's like, to me as a photography buff, the specs were the thing that got me interested, obviously, and I think the Zoe, I totally, even though it's like not a spec thing, it's a feature, but it's such a compelling feature, you know?
Yeah. Well, so this is a typical gallery, and I think the first thing you notice is actually things are coming to life. But so, okay, one of the other cool things about this gallery experience, you didn't ask about this, but I want to show you, is that the phone actually automatically creates a highlight movie for you. So it takes your photos, your videos, and your Zoes, and puts them all together in this really cool kind of edited way.
And it's real time.
And it's all happening in real time. Yeah, if you're like, you know what, I like this theme, but I want to just remix it.
Right.
You hit remix, and it grabs different content. Or if you're like, you know what, actually, what I really want is I want something a little bit more upbeat.
Yep. Yeah, we covered that in a lot of our write-up posts. I can't wait, honestly, to play with this. You know, like, so hopefully I'll get one of these very soon, right, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to get one to you.
Great. Well, listen, we should wrap this up, but listen, it's such a pleasure talking to you and
awesome.
getting us some insight on this unique design. I mean, there's so much little questions that really remain unanswered for us. Thanks for answering them.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, cheers.
All right.